Hello there. I'm Paul Gerrard. I'm hosting a fireside chat, interview, conversation with a friend of mine who's looking to get involved with the Test Engineering Society. The Test Engineering Society is an attempt to bring the test engineering industry into the 21st century, or at least to bring it into professional status. The hope is that the society will help us establish what the profession actually looks like and act as a focus for people in the industry to make progress in their careers. This is the first of what I hope to be many fireside chats, let's call them, with people who support the aims of the society, who are helping it to make progress. Today I'm talking to Paul Mowat. Paul's an accomplished technology consulting, director of systems engineering delivery, known for successfully implementing innovative technical solutions across various sectors. He's worked across many industries, including banking, logistics, public, retail, and telecom. He's a strong background in leading transformational change and adopting modern engineering practices like Agile, Kanban, Scrum, Safe, DevOps, and automation, particularly in the areas of SAP, Oracle, Salesforce, and cloud technology. I'm sorry I had to read all that out because it's quite a mouthful. Paul, welcome. If let's start by, if you could give us an overview of how you got where you're at, how you got into testing, and what your journey has been like and where you're at now in your life.
Yeah, sure. And thank you. Thank you for inviting me today. So Paul and I know each other from way back when the test management forum groups were going. So it's good to be back. It's good to speak to you. I got into testing by accident. My degree was in business and management. And I thought, I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I left university, but I knew I wanted to combine it with technology. And I thought that'd be an advantage. So I spent probably the first couple of years of my career help desk support, learning Visual Basic. I know the last Visual Basic version 7 finished way back in 98. And I fell into testing by accident. I was a tester in a quintessential startup, if you like. It was in someone's garage or above someone's garage in the Cotswolds. And it was AI back then in the late 90s. It was using AI engines, game engines, which was focusing on chess, shogi, go, those types of games.
Mm.
And I quite enjoyed it. I enjoyed the fact of being able to look at requirements, articulate what they were, also think about usability, even back then, and you could say break it. Where were the points where the usability wasn't so good, but also where were the points where it didn't meet the requirements? And what was the user experience of those games? And of course, learning some of those games was also fun. We also had a good contract with Nokia. We were testing the 7110 mobile phone when the mobile phone platform came out. So that was quite fun because the mobile phone was used in one of the films that came out around that time. So got into it early, got into it by accident. And I think if I look across my entire career over 2 decades now, I've done every single role. So I've been a tester, I've moved to a senior tester, team lead, test manager, test architect, automation lead, and then into where I am today, a delivery director. So responsible for programs and much more than just tests. But that test has allowed me to enter into those, program delivery type roles.
Mm. That sounds great. I'm very interested in the fact that you got into testing, or you say you got into testing by accident. And that is so common, isn't it? A lot of people didn't plan to get into testing, but somehow we all ended up here. It's interesting that you started off with technologies that were probably a little bit out there, I guess, compared with like middle of the road IT. So how did that give you a background, to your later career, do you think? The early start and the later career?
I think it's my enthusiasm and passion, which I still have today. And, a bit of luck and a bit of forward thinking in terms of, right, I knew that they just launched the testing syllabus and certifications. And I thought to myself, if I'm going to get into testing, as a minimum, I need to go through the certifications. It opens doors. It's not everything. And I get the, the conversations and the discussions on examinations and syllabuses, etc. However, it does open doors. So I was very focused on gaining those because it gave me more knowledge to apply in the day-to-day job. And then from there, there was what I call my first formal testing role at a startup. It was called Sim Performer. And what they did was they used DBA capacity planning, but instead of doing it, on paper, you could simulate it on the system that they built. So it did SQL statements in the back end. And if DBA capacity planners ran these statements in the real world, it would take weeks or months. But this tool took seconds. It was also an integral part later for Sim Performer for Oracle. So we were acquired by another company, but that gave me a wide range of skills and experience to go and bring in governance, structure, dare I say it, test director, win runner, automating tools, so it was a startup, and it allowed me a wide breadth of scope, which allowed me to become comfortable in those not unknown areas at such an earlier stage in my career.
I think a lot of people look to ISTQB, which is obviously the main certification scheme, as giving you a start, and it has value. I think as it gives you a vocabulary which you can then is portable, which is good, and it gives you a sense of structure, but also it's an example of how to do things. It's not an answer to all our problems, is it? And as soon as you get into a real project, you start thinking, oh, that's not what I saw in ISTQB, and you move on quickly. But you have to learn on the job. And everyone I've met has done some theory, read some books, but the practicalities take over, don't they? And they draw you into all sorts of interesting problem areas, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's where people maybe stop. And, over my career, I've recommended to people because I'm passionate about helping develop people, having an impact on industry. And that's why I've, got many hats and support some of the organizations like the BCS SIGIS group, where I've been the marketing and communication secretary for the last 4 years. You build up a repository of use cases and knowledge, and, you can taxonomy. It didn't quite work in this particular industry, but it's evolved in this industry. Banking tends to be leading and at the forefront. Retail tends to be much more challenging because budgets and margins are very tight. So if you take, what you've learned and you structure it, you can really use that as a baseline for any future roles in your career development, rather than just having, I've done ISTQB, and that's it.
Exactly. Yeah. So not to dwell on certification much longer, I have to say, it's got a role to play, but it's not the answer. I think we all know that. Again, an example that hit me in the first few years when I got involved in test consulting was, I remember being interviewed to get certain pieces of work, typically a test strategy kind of work, and people would say, "Have you got a methodology?" And I'd say, "No." "Oh, well, the people we spoke to this morning have one. What have you got to offer?" I said, "Well, we do it from scratch. Every project's different, every application's different, every company's different. I've got 25 ologies. Which one do you want?" Yeah, but that's not the answer. The answer is I will work with you to help you develop how you approach testing in the round.
And that's important, I think, because
it's absolutely critical. Yeah.
A lot of people are looking for that template, and really the template doesn't exist. You can have a script, and you can maybe pick and choose a few parts, but you're right, you have to tailor it for every client, every organization in that industry. Otherwise, you are templating it, and it's very easily said that you've just picked that up and lifted and shifted it.
And I don't think it works. That's the thing. And yeah, you might be able to squeeze certain things into certain places, But I think that's one problem we've got, in that people almost expect testing to be a just do it, however the hell it is. And it's a real challenge for us, isn't it? It's a real problem solving activity. It's the way I was introduced to it by the person who hired me many years ago. I mean, what in general, what are the biggest issues that you've encountered in your career? You know, the biggest quote problems, the real nasty areas, let's say.
But from a test career perspective, I think it's the narrative around testing. You know, we've been at the center of, when budgets get reduced, right, the first thing we'll do, we won't look at the development team, we won't look at the business team requirements, we'll look at test. And it's the narrative around, well, testing's holding us up. Well, yeah, we've got defects, and those defects are pretty critical. You go live and it falls over, then impact your brand. So, what do you want to do? Automation as well. So, and then the many flavors of testing that have happened over the years. I remember when, it was manual, that's now become exploratory. Then it became manual to technical tests. So technical tests was around automation, but also OAT, because a lot of manual testers didn't have the technical understanding or experience of running OAT phases and performance.
And by OAT, do you mean like the ops side of things? Is that?
Yeah, the operation,
okay.
Data centers. So I've got experience building up data centers and actually going in, lifting up the floors, pulling out the electricity supply cables to make sure they've got a proper disaster failover, and pulling out the cables. I remember the government architect was, he was scared when I was walking through pulling off the cables, and that was really fun. That was proper, failover redundant testing. But people didn't have that knowledge and understanding at the time. And then it started to become, dissected even further. So what about security testing? And all of these become isolated. So you had to build up these big teams. And I think there were silos within the teams, there's handovers. And of course, you're looking at Agile and the flow. With handovers, it slows down. And you don't really, when you start to talk about the security challenge, the automation challenge, the SIT challenge, people just think it's too much. It's a test challenge. Test is holding us up.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest challenge we've had to overcome. And of course, at the time, the C-suite hadn't gone through university and done technical degrees and done programming and done testing. Whereas now we see that's totally different. You see a lot of the C-suite who are technical, who have to get their sleeves rolled up. And, I've worked with a couple of consultancies where you've had the director who's directing the program, but also coding. A little bit like the project management challenge, does a project manager need to project manage, or does the project manager need to have knowledge of that industry? That's a debate that will go on. But I think that's one of the biggest challenges I've seen.
Yeah. I remember in the 80s, my first real programming job, I would call it. Up till then, I was a bit of an amateur because I was an engineer, meant to be anyway. And he was the chief engineer of this engineering consulting firm, and he was writing Fortran like it was going out of business. It was like, and he used to give me like 50 or 60 lines he'd handwritten and said it should work something like this. And I thought, okay, I thought I was going to be. So he was like chief programmer as well on his team. So anyway, I think the challenges don't go away. So I mean, some of them have never changed. So like we never have enough time, whatever that is. We get squeezed at the end when things are delivered late. We don't get more time, do we? Even then, even though the argument would be you've got to spend more time. If there are more bugs in the software, well, let's test less. It doesn't compute, does it? Those problems don't go away, and we still have to argue for our existence almost, and certainly for what we do still. So I don't think a lot has changed in the last 30 something years.
It hasn't. It hasn't, but I think we've grown up in terms of you articulate the risk and the impact of the business, and you think about the brand, and you don't necessarily. No one releases software defect free, and you have to get to that point and then work backwards and go, okay, what's your tolerance? What's your definition of done? What's acceptable for this organization? Because we're going to have a load of cosmetic defects. and we can fix them because they're not necessarily going to impact, the growth model. Customers are still going to be able to go through the flow and the process, and are still going to be able to purchase goods, and your revenue is still going to grow. But when it starts to impact that, then that becomes, as they say, a P1 or a P2, and that's where the focus is. I also get quite frustrated about, I call it noise or waste in the system. So as testers, you've got to really think about raising defects. You've got to make sure you've done your investigation, and you've got to make sure you've articulated it clearly, concisely, because once it goes into that funnel, there's a whole load of actions that are kicked off, and that's effort, that's time, and for me, that's waste.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah.
I think an analogy I've been using for quite a few years now with people who are finding difficulty in that conversation, like how much testing is enough? What do you want from me? When I raise a defect, why do I get a frown as if it's my fault? All that kind of game. And I think the trick is to separate yourself from that emotional thing and be a journalist. And what your role is, perhaps one way of looking at it, is to be a journalist providing accurate news. The news could be good or it could be bad. It's not for you to judge necessarily whether it's good or bad. It's for the stakeholders to make that judgment. And so I think, to me, we're moving into a more grown-up era of testers actually having to deal with this stuff and knowing how to deal with it, because it's a very sensitive topic for a lot of people, because it's scary when things go wrong. For the people whose jobs depend on it, maybe.
Yeah, they need to be business aligned. They need to understand the business, the industry, the ambition of the business, the objectives of the business, and how every task they're delivering adds value to the business or the customer. I think because I remember talking about this where you presented about Microsoft had tried to bring the testers closer to the users. And then in the end, what they did was they brought the users into the fold, and the business users were running the testing because they understood the business, because they were the business users. And it was just the testers who provided the governance, the structure, the framework. And some of those examples, have been really successful. And I think we've just iterated from that for the last 10, 15 years.
Just as an aside, I think a lot of people I've met in over the years have started their careers in the business and then got involved in acceptance testing, and because they kind of enjoyed it and it paid better, probably they thought, oh, there's a career in it, and then they became full-time testers in their business, and ultimately test managers, and have gone into all sorts of other areas too. It's the old, it's a very old story, isn't it? That the techies don't understand business and business don't understand techies. And I think in some ways testers we're an information channel, I think, that can help that conversation between people who are techies and non-techies. So yeah, but it's kind of, to me, and what's coming is to me, I believe the time is right to start looking at whether we should be a profession. But what does a profession mean to you? What do you see it as?
Yeah, I agree.
Good question. I'm sorry.
Yes, some people might say it's too late, but better late than never. I think it's a good place for people to hang their hat, for recognition, for collaboration, the ability to meet leaders, people in the profession through conferences, because I imagine that's where we're going to go, the direction of travel, to help shape those experiences and to understand the wider context we operate within. So software delivery, software engineering, and software engineering is accelerating and changing at such a pace. I foresee, we talk about QA as a separate, isolated team. I see QA as fully embedded within that development process, so that you're not acting or going to one team. It's part of the, you could say, and I don't want to use it, and I'm going to use it. You could say you are, it's an SDET in the development team. But I think we'll get to a level of maturity where you'll have a development team, but someone who's come up through the quality route. So they're, and again, names, full stack, SDET in test. But I think that's where we'll go. And for those people, you need a technical home, and the society will help provide that.
Yeah.
I believe.
Well, certainly that's the hope. It's got to be that taking us in that direction. I think there's an awful lot of merit in trying to define what we mean by a profession and having that conversation, because as you know, we're looking to take the other engineering professions like electrical, mechanical, civil, and so on, and looking at them as a kind of as a template. I hesitate to use that word, but there's a mechanism to move into that space to be regarded as a professional engineer. And what I'm encouraged by the knowledge that it's not just about technical knowledge, important as it is. It's also about leadership and thought leadership, as well as running teams, perhaps, but interpersonal skills, codes of ethics, continuous professional learning, all this other good stuff, which gets left behind, I think, doesn't it, in a lot of organizations?
It does. And it's, leaders, when we talk about leaders, they're all encompassing. They're not one trick ponies. You've got to adapt the environment, and your leadership style adapts to that. And, there's a whole facet of attributes that stand behind that. And I think, the society will help enforce that, because we'll understand much more clearer what it means to be a professional software test engineer and the levels that go with it.
Yeah. And I don't think, I'm hoping that we don't need to, well, I don't think we will be prescriptive in saying these are the specific technical skills you need. Unless you can generate good automation scripts, you're not a good tester. That's a completely meaningless statement. It's a tool to be used in its place, in context, let's say. But I think there's a real demand for recognition that we should look at the other soft skills with much more focus than we have in the past, because we tend to spend all our time talking to people, trying to figure out what the problem is, and then convincing them it's a good idea to do some testing, and so on and so forth. We spend all our time doing interpersonal stuff, I think. So certainly in bureaucratic projects and in agile projects, you've got to be part of the conversation every day. So it fits, doesn't it?
Communication is key. Clear communication, articulation of the business requirements into the test, the quality area. If you don't get that right from get go, then there's going to be challenges. There's going to be problems much further downstream, without a doubt.
And I think it's becoming a bit more a pattern that if we don't add value just at the end by running some tests to find some bugs and then hand it on, we have a role to play right throughout the program, programs of projects as well as just projects, in saying this requirement is not ready for building, let alone testing, and so I think we can add value right across the piece. I mean, what do you think what would be your vision for where this is going, the society? What's your view on that?
I'd like to think that we build up a good representation of software testers. I think I looked recently, there's something like maybe just under 10,000 people in the UK who you could classify as software testers. So having, a good proportion of those, and globally as well, because it's going to be global. But we have to start somewhere, as you were saying, in the UK, and we build up so people understand the trends, the advancement in industry, and how people can change and tailor their careers to align to those advancements in industry. But also, people want to be recognized, people want to get involved, present use cases, some interesting delivery that they've done, and share that with the world. So I'd like to see the society, become a forum for that. White papers as well, publishing, marketing. So we get the message out that people understand that, we're not an anchor. We can ship products daily, hourly, at the pace at which the program is delivering. the automation is hooked into that pipeline, and as soon as we press the button, you're off, it's gone live.
Yeah.
I'd like to get to a position where people understand that, and the narrative, as I said earlier, has changed and it's moved on and it's forward thinking rather than looking back in the past.
I think we've moved away from one approach fits all, probably many years ago now. But what I see with testers is every project you've done in your career, and I've done in my career, and everybody in everybody's career, is they're all different. So every time it's a learning exercise to understand what the problem to solve with this system is, and then how to test this system appropriately. So I think one definition of a good tester would be they can test anything. Now that would be quite a claim to make, but I think that's an aspiration that, given any kind of system in scope, a good tester can ask the right questions to find out what they need to know and understand what they don't know and yet need to know to make progress. I don't know if that's the right mission statement for what we have as our career development, but I think it's a start. And I think what we're doing now is moving into a conversation about what this should look like, what the society should really kind of call itself and have as its aspiration. I'm conscious of the time, and it's been really good. Is there anything you want to bring into the conversation? Is there anything on your mind?
I would say get involved, become a part of it. I'm involved in a whole raft of organizations, from TMMI, Women in Test that Hannah Reynolds at We Do Recruitment recently launched in January.
Yeah.
That nearly hit 1,500. So we talk about
Really?
diversity. Yeah. We talk about, and I don't mean just diversity from a gender basis as well. I mean, all things diverse.
Yeah.
We need to pull in different types of mindset, different people. The analogy I use is you walk down the street and an organization really should represent what the street looks like. Then you've got true diversity.
Yeah.
And with that, get involved, throw your name in the hat, get out there, publicize yourself, and support this initiative, but also support the industry.
I think you're absolutely right that the society should also be a supporter of these other initiatives. Like Women in Test is one. One of my hobby horses is mental health and neurodiversity. You well know that there's lots of people in our business who are on the spectrum. Some of them you hardly know, and others you think, gosh, I know exactly why you're a tester, because you've got a pinpoint accuracy that you will not let go. And so there's I think there's an opportunity for us to flag these initiatives and give them support and publicity and move the world along. So I think it's an opportunity to do lots of good things, and that's got to be one of them, I think. Paul, thank you for your time. I've really enjoyed our half hour or so. It's been really helpful, and I'm as you know, the goal is to try and expose people like yourself to a wider public, so they say, well, this is the kind of person that we're trying to work with and for, and who are helping us, towards the goal of getting society off the ground and in business, if you like. Paul, thanks very much. I hope I'll speak to you soon. Thank you for your time.
Take care.